General Hospital teasers for the week of September 1st to 5th indicate that a crime scene investigation will begin, while Willow Tate confronts a legal issue. Britt Westbourne also appears to be planning a dramatic move, so let's talk about all of the upcoming drama on the ABC serial. For starters, Stella Henry will be scared after being detained. Stella will be concerned about her prospective prison sentence, as well as the difficulties Curtis Ashford may get into by seeking revenge on Drew Cain. Of course, Portia Robinson may be the one to be most concerned about, as she is about to enter perilous area. If Portia seeks revenge on Drew instead, she may face her own repercussions. Kai Taylor will also have to determine whether he is willing to turn against Drew and join forces with Trina Robinson once she makes a pitch. Because of what Drew did to Stella, Kai might be inclined to join Trina's vindictive side. Elizabeth Baldwin will undoubtedly sense something is up when it comes to missing Rick Lansing. Rick's disappearance will likely create concerns for Liz, especially because he represents Willow. This will put Willow in a dilemma and may require her to hire a different lawyer to represent her in this custody fight. Willow may be forced to seek legal assistance from someone else now that Rick is missing. That might enrage Nina Reeves against Rick and make Ava Jerome uneasy if she has to listen to Nina's complaints about Rick bolting. Even if Rick uses his phone to make explanations for his absence via text, Elizabeth may have a gut feeling that something isn't right. Could Liz be the one to expose Ava, Christina Corinthos Davis, and Alexis Davis's imprisonment plot sooner or later? Molly Lansing Davis, on the other hand, may have her own set of questions once Rick abruptly disappears from the map. There will also be a crime scene investigation after Danny Morgan and Rocco Falconeri discover a body near the docks. The cops will investigate into this and try to determine exactly what occurred to the victim. If Colette Moreau turns up floating in the sea, possibly after getting on Jen Sidwell's bad side and being thrown off the parapet, the WSB will get involved as well. Jack Brennan may have to solve a Colette mystery while trying to learn more about Vaughn and Jocelyn Jack's plight in Croatia. Britt may then make a risky move after acquiring new suspicions at the Five Poppies resort. Will Britt use the burner phone Jason Morgan supplied to call for support, or will she fly solo while looking for additional information? In any case, Britt may become entangled in the Jocelyn and Vaughn mess at some time, so stay tuned for more dangerous news. According to General Hospital teasers, the week of September 1st to 5th will be filled with unexpected twists and intense confrontations. The General Hospital spoilers for Wednesday, August 27th, state that Nina Reeves will lose it over Willow Tate, while Drew Cain begs for one final chance. Ava Jerome will also require Lucas Jones' assistance, so this is what GH fans should look forward to. For openers, Rick Lansing will stay a captive due to Ava, Christina Corinthos Davis, and Alexis Davis's latest scheme. Although Rick will have a visitor in the basement where he is stuck, his calls for help will be ineffective. Alexis should keep Rick tied up tight while she deals with other matters. Sonny Corinthos will catch up with Alexis about the restraining order issue and promise that Drew will get what he deserves. Christina will confront Molly Lansing Davis' anger over the Ava seduction plot. Molly will chastise Christina for paying Cody Bell to stand between Ava and Rick, but Christina has far deeper secrets. That involves causing the vehicle accident that nearly killed Rick, as well as the hostage situation Christina is currently involved in. While Christina handles Molly's heated queries, Ava will find down Lucas and request assistance. It's difficult to fathom Ava telling the truth about hostage Rick, but she'll still ask Lucas for a favor and hope for the best. Across town, Marco Rios will advise Giovanni Gio Palmieri. Gio has avoided Dante Falconeri and Brooklyn Quartermain since discovering they were his biological parents, but things may be changing. Marco will talk to Gio about reconnecting with Jen Sidwell and hopes he could also reunite with Natalia Ramirez. Marco may encourage Gio to take advantage of the fact that his parents are still alive and ready to welcome him. Brooklyn won't want to get her hopes up too much, but she will encounter an optimistic sign on Wednesday's episode. Gio could take the first step toward a relationship with Dante because they are about to spend time together. Brooklyn could be next, if Dante can persuade Gio to forgive her or at least listen to her. However, Gio and Brooklyn's quest to rekindle their friendship may encounter some difficulties. Curtis Ashford will warn Portia Robinson about Stella Henry getting into legal trouble. Stella will try to remain hopeful during a conversation with Isaiah Gannon, but her arrest is imminent. Portia will notice something alarming, so we'll see if it's Curtis leaning on Jordan Ashford or this arrest playing out. In any case, Portia is about to make a bold move, potentially crossing the line. Nina will make a shocking discovery at the Port Charles Grill when she comes into Willow, who may be willing to make a deal with Drew. Although Drew may see this as his last chance to show himself and win Willow over, Nina should be horrified that Willow is giving him any attention. Fans will witness Nina go off on Willow as she wants answers, but Willow will not believe she owes Nina an explanation. Willow's main purpose is clear: get her children back by whatever means necessary. If Drew can make that happen for Willow, she might be willing to move back into his house and try to rebuild their relationship. Regardless, General Hospital rumors suggest Willow will make a pitch that Nina dislikes, infuriating her mother. Outside the door, Dante Falconeri leaned against the wall, his mouth hard, thumbing through the preliminary report. He didn't know what to make of Willow's alleged involvement. Everything about her screamed innocence, but the evidence they possessed was difficult to dismiss. Her fingerprints were found on a piece of evidence seized from the crime site, which he could not ignore. Jordan Ashford had made it clear that they had to follow the trail, no matter where it led, even if it meant investigating someone like Willow, who had hitherto avoided any hint of criminal activity. Dante stroked the back of his neck, knowing that Michael Corinthos would not take anything lightly. When Michael learned Willow was being investigated for a possible murder cover-up, there was going to be hell to pay. Michael was already on his way, striding quickly through the station's hallways with a sharpness in his stride that forced everyone he passed to step aside. He had received the call 30 minutes prior, and the moment he heard Willow's name associated with a crime scene investigation, his blood boiled. This wasn't just about her, it was about the entire Corinthos Quartermain family, and he knew the press would be all over it the moment the story broke. He stormed into Jordan's office without knocking, demanding answers, but he received the same response: Willow couldn't be released until they completed questioning her. Michael wanted to yell, threaten, and tug every thread he could, but deep inside he knew it wouldn't help Willow right now. The only way to protect her was to remain cool and discover out what had happened before things got significantly worse. Back at the hospital, Britt Westbourne paced her office, fully aware that she was treading risky ground. She'd overheard something she shouldn't have, and now she had knowledge that may influence the course of the inquiry. Britt stumbled across the hospital's security tape the night of the event, and what she saw made her stomach twist. Willow had not been in the restricted area where the missing files had originated, instead, someone else had. But, before she could turn over the footage, she had to make a decision. If she came forward, she risked being implicated in something she wasn't prepared to confront. The video captured more than just the mysterious invader, it also revealed what Britt had done that could cost her everything. Britt was not known for playing it safe. Her relationship with Port Charles had been chaotic, convoluted, and fraught with regrettable decisions, but this time was different. This was no longer about self-preservation, it was about doing the right thing, even if it meant destroying a few relationships along the way. She grabbed her phone and hesitated, scrolling through her contacts until she came across someone she wasn't sure she could trust but needed anyway: Jason Morgan. He had always been the sort who could manage situations like these, who thrived when the stakes were high and the answers were ambiguous. Jason answered the second ring, his voice calm, low, and steady. When Britt told him about the footage, there was a long silence on the other end, and his tone changed. He realized right once that this wasn't simply about a missing file or an unintentional run-in with the law. Someone was planning something bigger, something to push people against one another, and Willow was being used as leverage. Jason promised Britt that he'd meet her at the hospital to study the footage and decide what to do next, but his instincts were immediately telling him that someone had planted the evidence against Willow on purpose. Willow eventually broke her silence in the interrogation chamber. Her voice trembled as she told Dante and Jordan that she had been at the Quartermain mansion at the time in question but denied ever touching the file or entering the room where the evidence had been discovered. Her tale was coherent, detailed, and emotive, but the physical evidence said otherwise. Dante scrutinized her attentively, looking for signs of duplicity, but all he saw was dread, raw, real terror from a woman who had no idea why she was sitting there. He believed her, but belief wasn't enough in this case. They required proof, which they didn't have yet. Outside the station, Michael was pacing restlessly, his phone clamped against his ear as he dialed Diane Miller, their excellent lawyer. If anyone could handle this storm, it was her. Diane listened intently, and while she promised to come straight to the station, she told Michael that this would not be easy. The DA's office was already under pressure to produce results in this inquiry, which meant someone had to take the blame. If they don't identify the true culprit soon, Willow's name will be dragged through the mud before anyone can stop it. While Michael tried to safeguard Willow's reputation, Jason came at the hospital and silently entered Britt's office. Britt quickly showed him the footage, and the two of them bent over the monitor as the grainy black-and-white photographs depicted a shadowy person creeping into the records room. The burglar was cautious, meticulous, and obviously familiar with the hospital's security layout. Jason froze the frame at one point, staring at the indistinct outline of the person's face, and his jaw tightened. It wasn't someone he recognized right away, but their actions were familiar, intentional, and not random. This wasn't about stealing files, Jason finally stated, his voice quiet but confident. This was about framing someone. Britt nodded, her lips drawn together in a narrow line. She had suspected the same thing, but seeing Jason confirm it made the reality sink in even harder. They both knew what would happen next. If they reported this to the police, it could backfire. If they waited too long, Willow's predicament could get out of hand. In any case, they were standing on a cliff's edge, and one false move could bring everything crashing down. Diane returned to the station and entered the questioning room with her typical calm and cutting edge. She quickly demanded Willow's release, alleging a lack of serious evidence and accused the police of holding her client without cause. Jordan resisted, believing that they had enough to detain her for questioning, but Diane's unrelenting insistence eventually led Willow out of the room and into Michael's arms. The relief was great for a time, but it was fleeting since the bigger problem loomed over them. The inquiry was far from over. Willow sat silently in the living room, staring at the flickering fire, while Michael talked to Jason on the phone in the corner. Her mind was racing, attempting to make sense of everything. Why would anyone try to frame her? What could be their motive? And why did it feel like every time she felt things was finally calm, another storm raged through? She had worked so hard to create a future for herself, her family, and her children, and now it felt as if all she had built was hanging by a thread. Jason comforted Michael that he and Britt were working to narrow down the suspects, but warned them both that the deeper they probed, the darker it would become. There were suspicions that someone high up in the hospital administration was moving pieces behind the scenes, someone with a strong interest in Willow being implicated. Jason had witnessed power plays like these before, and they never ended well. Meanwhile, Britt was discreetly making her own moves. She didn't trust the cops to handle the situation properly, so she turned to someone unexpected, Brad Cooper. If anyone knew how to manipulate medical records and unearth buried data trails, it was Brad, and Britt needed all of his knowledge right now. Brad hesitated at first. He had promised himself he was done getting involved in situations like this, but Britt reminded him that Willow wasn't just collateral damage, she was being targeted. That, more than anything, persuaded him to help. Days later, Britt and Brad discovered something explosive. The intruder was not working alone. Someone was sending them insider information, and they had direct access to the hospital's security systems. As they investigated more, it became evident that this wasn't just about one lost file, it was part of a much larger conspiracy involving patient data, hidden accounts, and financial inconsistencies that, if discovered, could destroy careers. By the time Jason received the call from Britt, he realized this was about more than just clearing Willow's name. It was about dismantling an entire system aimed to cover up wrongdoing within General Hospital. However, if they went public, they would face powerful people with extensive ties who would not hesitate to defend themselves at any cost. Willow sat on the couch that night, fatigued and upset, and Michael knelt in front of her, clutching her hands tightly. He assured her they'd get through it, that he'd fight for her no matter how bad things got. But they both knew it was only the beginning. The investigation was far from ended, and Britt's daring decision to reveal the truth had set off a chain reaction that could not be reversed. Somewhere out there, the person in charge was watching, waiting, and preparing for their next strike. Nina paced the length of the Metro Court's private apartment, her heels clicking hard on the marble floor as her breathing became labored. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the edge of the bar, recalling every word of her passionate argument with Willow earlier that afternoon. Her chest rose and fell, and her mind raced out of control. She had gone there hoping to make peace and find common ground, but it had backfired. Willow's quiet, measured comments struck further than Nina had anticipated. They were not laced with poison, but with disappointment, which Nina could not endure from her daughter. When Willow eventually informed her she needed distance, Nina's restraint was shattered. Nina's rage in that moment was unlike anything she'd felt since the early days after her coma, when she realized how many years she'd missed. But this was different. This was not simply anger, it was sadness disguised as rage. She accused Willow of influencing Michael into turning the kids against her, of playing the victim while secretly trying to completely remove Nina from their life. Her voice increased, eliciting strange looks from other guests at the Quartermain house. Willow, startled but firm, kept her stance, reminding Nina that trust had to be earned, and Nina had already squandered too many opportunities. It was too late when Michael intervened to calm things down. Nina's voice cracked on her final cruel sentence to Willow, "One day, you'll regret cutting me out." Willow's silence spoke more than words could. Hours later, Nina's imagination replayed the entire incident like a nightmare on repeat. Her hands clasped a glass of wine she hadn't touched, and her reflection in the sweet mirror was strange, pale, weary, and haunted. Meanwhile, across town, Drew sat alone in his Aurora Media office, his laptop open but untouched, the cursor flickering on a blank page. He wasn't thinking about the next campaign or the stockholders who were hounding him for quarterly reports. Instead, it was focused on the gradually tightening noose around his neck. Ever since he'd taken the hazardous shortcuts to stabilize Aurora's finances, he knew the truth could bring it all crashing down. But he hadn't imagined how relentless the SEC inquiry would be. It was his last opportunity. One incorrect move, and he could lose more than just Aurora. His freedom. His repute. Worse, he risks losing Willow's trust, Michael's support, and any future he may have imagined for himself following the nightmare of Pentonville. Drew reflected on the commitments he made when he was released from prison, and how determined he was to rebuild his life the proper way, legally. But desperation has a way of blurring morality, and the repercussions are creeping up quicker than he can handle. He slumped back in his chair, rubbing his temples, contemplating his limited options. He could come clean to Michael, but it would mean Michael cutting him off completely, and given Michael's huge sway over Aurora, that could spell tragedy. He could try to bargain quietly with the SEC, but previous attempts had failed. Then there was the other option, which Drew despised even considering, involving Carly. She had more resources, contacts, and sharper instincts than anybody he knew, yet their relationship was already strained. Bringing her into this may devastate everything. But the clock was ticking, and the longer he waited, the more deadly things became. Across Port Charles, Ava sat alone in the dimly lit gallery, the silence nearly suffocating. Her nicely controlled facade disguised the fury raging under the surface. She poured herself another glass of red wine, watching the liquid swirl as if it held the answers she so sought. Ava had been through her fair share of crises, betrayals, cover-ups, and secrets that could destroy lives, but this one was unique. This time, her back was firmly against the wall. The evidence linking her to Austin's disappearance began to resurface in unexpected ways. What she had thought was handled, buried beneath layers of deceit and misdirection, was suddenly resurfacing. And if the wrong people put the pieces together, Ava's carefully constructed life might collapse overnight. She needed aid, but she couldn't turn to Sonny because their alliance was irreparably broken and his priorities were elsewhere. She didn't trust Nicholas, and Spencer was too unpredictable to involve. That left just one person who might be able to do the impossible, Lucas. Ava reached for her phone and paused for a few seconds before hitting the button. Lucas Jones was not someone she had kept close, but his talents as a doctor and history of keeping secrets made him the only person she could even consider approaching. When he answered, his voice sounded careful and guarded, as if he could already feel the weight of her call. Ava did not waste time exchanging niceties. She informed him she desperately needed his assistance, and it couldn't include anybody else. Lucas first refused to participate in Ava's pandemonium. But when she raised the potential of someone else's life being at danger, his tone changed. He agreed to meet her in private, late at night, away from prying eyes. Willow sat on the side of her bed, still disturbed from her earlier fight with Nina. Her chest tightened, her hands gripped in her lap, as she fought to understand the flood of feelings she'd been hiding for months. She didn't want Nina out of her life. Deep down, she did. She wanted her children to know about their grandma, and she believed Nina was capable of change. But she couldn't force trust to exist, especially after what had transpired with the SEC tip and Carly's incarceration. Michael entered gently, his look mild, and approached her. Without saying anything, he sat next her, throwing his arm across her shoulders. She leaned into him, gaining strength from his constant presence. Michael tried to convince her that having limits didn't make her harsh, it made her protective of herself and their family. But, as much as she appreciated his comments, Willow couldn't fight the gnawing remorse that was sneaking into her heart. Was she doing the correct thing? Or was she simply replicating the same cycles of pain Nina had always experienced? Downstairs, Carly and Drew crossed paths in the living room, and the tension was evident. Carly could feel Drew's tiredness imprinted on his features, the type of weight that comes from keeping too many secrets for too long. She probed him for answers, thinking there was more to his attitude than he was revealing. Drew hesitated, torn between protecting her and sharing the responsibility. Finally, with a resigned sigh, he revealed that the SEC was getting closer than ever, and that if they didn't move quickly, everything would erupt. Carly, ever the strategist, quickly went into action mode. Drew wasn't convinced, even when she reminded him that they had before faced incredible odds and survived. This wasn't about outwitting a rival, it was about federal agents looking into every aspect of his life. One single move might put them all in danger. Nonetheless, Carly promised she would not let him go down without a fight. Back at the Metro court, Nina brushed away her tears, disgusted at herself for losing control, but her rage swiftly returned. She refused to be left out of her daughter's life. As she gazed out the window at the city, she made a solemn vow: if Willow want distance, that was great, but Nina would find another way to ensure her position in her grandchildren's life, no matter what it cost. Meanwhile, Ava arrived at the peaceful, secluded area where she had planned to meet Lucas. The night air was cold, and faint sounds from the waterfront could be heard in the distance. Lucas stood with his hands in his pockets, cautious but alert. Ava wasted no time presenting the issue, which included shards of information concerning Austin, potential dangers closing in, and the dangerous leverage someone could have over her. Lucas listened intently, his brow furrowing further at each admission. When she finally halted, Lucas groaned, knowing he was about to cross a line he vowed never to cross again. He promised to help Ava, but only once, and only if she told him everything. No lies, omissions, or half-truths. Ava agreed, her tone low and desperate. Whatever secrets they buried that night, they both knew they would be bound together in ways they couldn't escape afterward. Drew returned to Aurora and watched out his office window as the city lights faded into golden streaks. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was brief, ambiguous, and devastating. "We understand what you did. Call this number if you want to get out." His heart accelerated, and his breath caught in his throat. Whoever sent the message had him surrounded, and his options had just limited even more. Drew sat back in his chair, the weight of his decisions bearing down on him, realizing there were no good solutions left, only awful ones, and worse ones. The night in Port Charles dragged on, the city holding its breath as splintered friendships, buried secrets, and silent betrayals pushed everyone closer to the brink. Nina's sadness, Drew's desperation, and Ava's risky move were all strands entwined in a web that no one could see clearly yet. And when one thread cracked, the wave would affect them all. The air in Port Charles felt heavier that night, as if the city could feel the storm developing beneath its surface. Nina sat in solitude at the Metro Court, her wine unopened and her phone ringing with messages she couldn't bring herself to respond to. Her rage at Willow's rejection had hardened into something sharper, determination. She repeated every moment of their quarrel, each word stinging deeper, until her irritation turned to determination. If Willow desired distance, that was great, but Nina would not allow Michael dictate her role as a grandma. In her perspective, this was no longer about vengeance, it was about love, twisted, ugly, and desperate, but love nonetheless. She opened her laptop and started writing an email to her attorney, Martin, demanding that he look into every legal option to get visiting rights. Meanwhile, Drew's life was disintegrating faster than he could handle. That anonymous text tormented him, its implications biting into every logical portion of his mind. He knew better than to trust unsolicited offers, but he couldn't afford to ignore them either. He tried calling the number, his voice steady despite his racing heartbeat. On the other end, a low, garbled voice answered, directing him to meet alone in an abandoned warehouse near the docks. No names, no explanations, just one chance to rectify everything before the SEC buried him forever. Ava and Lucas sat together in the darkened gallery, poring over information Ava had recovered, which indicated to a far deeper conspiracy behind Austin's disappearance than either of them had anticipated. Lucas's face paled as he pieced together the time frame, recognizing that someone had gone to great pains to frame Ava. The concern was that whomever coordinated it wasn't done yet, and the next act would be even more deadly. The city lights flickered faintly over the docks as Drew stood frozen outside the abandoned warehouse, the cold night air stinging his skin. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, but the promise of a way out, even if it was a trap, pulled him forward. Inside, shadows stretched across the damp concrete floor, and the faint hum of machinery echoed in the distance. A tall figure emerged from the darkness, face obscured, voice calm but commanding. "You're running out of time, Drew," the man said. "Either you work with us, or you go down alone." The words hung heavy, offering no room for negotiation. Back at the Metro Court, Nina closed her laptop after firing off her demand to Martin. She stared out over the city, her mind already racing ahead, plotting her next move. If the courts failed her, she had another option, one she'd been avoiding until now, but it would change everything between her and Willow forever. Meanwhile, in the gallery's dim glow, Ava and Lucas exchanged uneasy glances as they uncovered the final page of the recovered files. Lucas's breath caught when he read the name scrawled across the top. It wasn't random. Someone close to all of them was pulling the strings.